There have been a series of violent earthquakes all over the world right now: Colombia, Venezuela, California, Japan. Our planet is currently shaking in several hotspots at once. Is this just a coincidence, or is there a global connection? We're going to take a very close look at this today and get right to it. Rarely have there been so many alarming reports of earthquakes and volcanic activity all at once as there have been in recent weeks. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is there a common tectonic cause, or is this cluster of quakes just a coincidence? If you don't want to miss any more news on this topic in the future, go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now. If you're already subscribed, please show your support for the video with a thumbs up. Thanks everyone. A powerful 7.4 magnitude earthquake has struck Colombia, causing massive damage in several cities. The epicenter was in the western part of the country, in the department of Choco, but the tremors were clearly felt even hundreds of kilometers away. According to the latest reports, more than 300 people have lost their lives. Thousands are reported missing, numerous buildings have collapsed, and rescue workers continue to search for people trapped under the rubble. This comes just a few weeks after a violent earthquake also struck neighboring Venezuela. On June 24th, a strong 7.5 magnitude quake shook the region there. Tectonically, the two events had different causes. In Venezuela, the quake was primarily caused by a lateral shift at the boundary between the Caribbean and South American plates, while the recent quake in Colombia is related to the subduction of the Nazca plate. So these are two different tectonic processes, but both demonstrate just how seismically active northern South America is. Geologists have observed that the entire Pacific Ring of Fire is becoming increasingly active. The Pacific Ring of Fire, approximately 40,000 kilometers long and up to 500 kilometers wide, is a gigantic geological zone that encircles the Pacific Ocean like a massive horseshoe. There are between 750 and 915 active and dormant volcanoes in this region. That's about 2/3 of all active volcanoes worldwide. About 90% of all earthquakes worldwide occur right here. The Ring of Fire is not a single geological structure, but was created by the subduction of various tectonic plates at the boundaries of the Pacific Ocean. Simply put, gigantic tectonic plates rub against each other, collide, and slide beneath one another. And this friction generates the raw energy that drives both earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Currently, the data is causing concern among geologists. On May 2nd, 2025, 47 volcanoes were simultaneously in an active eruptive state, one of the highest figures in recorded history. What's really giving geologists a headache is the clustering, the concentration of major eruptions within a very short period of time. This points to possible interconnected geological processes. The volcanoes are erupting almost simultaneously in clusters, as it were. Indonesia is at the epicenter of this volcanic awakening. The country recorded an incredible 6,508 volcanic eruptions in 2025. Several volcanoes were involved, including Semeru, Dukono, and Merapi. The situation at Mount Ibu is particularly dramatic. This volcano erupted 28 times in a single week, accompanied by sustained seismic activity. Since January 1st of last year, Mount Ibu has recorded 1,079 eruptions, sending ash plumes between 300 meters and 4 kilometers above the summit. Merapi, one of Indonesia's most dangerous volcanoes, also made headlines. On October 1st, 2025, researchers documented a pyroclastic flow that led to a 5-kilometer exclusion zone. The volcano is located directly above the densely populated island of Java, but the Pacific Ring of Fire has also flexed its tectonic muscles in other places. On July 29th of last year, an 8.8 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia. The quake itself was catastrophic, but what happened afterward was extraordinary. The Institute of Volcanology and Seismology of the Russian Academy of Sciences reported on August 6th that 7 Kamchatka volcanoes had erupted as a result of the earthquake, an event that hadn't been observed in this region for nearly 300 years. One of these volcanoes was Krasheninnikov. Its last eruption occurred around the year 1550. It had been dormant for nearly 5 centuries until the earthquake awakened it. Researchers keep track of volcanic activity through a combination of ground-based sensors, satellite imagery, and volcanological observatories around the world. Volcanic warnings are issued by scientists at volcanic observatories and are based on the analysis of data from monitoring networks, direct observations, and satellite sensors. The United States alone operates 5 regional volcano observatories, and similar facilities exist in Japan, Indonesia, Russia, and other countries along the Ring of Fire. These observatories monitor seismic activity, ground deformation, gas emissions, and thermal anomalies. Satellite technology has further revolutionized volcano monitoring. Scientists can now detect subtle changes in volcanic heat signatures or ground swelling from space, often before a visible eruption occurs. This gives communities valuable time to evacuate. What is striking about the recent volcanic eruptions around the Pacific Ring of Fire is that they were often preceded by earthquakes. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, large earthquakes can trigger nearby volcanic eruptions, but only if the volcano is already on the verge of erupting with enough magma inside and sufficiently high pressure. Russian seismologists also attribute the eruptions to the earthquake, which activated the magmatic sources and supplied them with additional energy. One of the warning signs scientists look for is what are known as seismic swarms. These are clusters of small earthquakes that occur in rapid succession. The Japan Meteorological Agency reported over 3,200 small to moderate-sized earthquakes in the region during the first quarter of 2025, compared to just 800 the previous year. These swarms often indicate magma movements deep underground. The Kamchatka earthquake followed a 10-day sequence that began with 50 quakes of magnitude 5.0 or greater, including a magnitude 7.4 earthquake on July 20 and 3 magnitude 6.6 earthquakes. Scientists note that the frequency and intensity of this eruption exceed the normal statistical patterns for the Ring of Fire. Traditionally, researchers expect volcanic eruptions to be relatively isolated events. A volcano erupts, releases pressure, and then returns to quiet. However, the period from 2024 to 2025 shows volcanoes erupting repeatedly, sometimes several times a day over extended periods. Starting in 2024, the entire Pacific Ring of Fire recorded over 15,000 earthquakes of magnitude 4.0 or higher, a 23% increase. Each of these earthquakes can destabilize volcanic systems or trigger secondary hazards such as landslides and tsunamis. And the fact that the Ring of Fire is becoming so active also affects the west coast of the United States. There, a scenario is looming that has the potential to be one of the most devastating earthquakes of all time, and that could in turn trigger powerful tsunamis. The formation of tsunamis is linked to how the Earth's tectonic plates move, particularly in areas known as subduction zones. One such zone, the Cascadia subduction zone, which stretches from southern Canada to northern California, is particularly dangerous in this regard and could produce the mother of all tsunamis. It is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire and is responsible for the activity of the Cascade volcanoes. A plate movement of this magnitude, which would trigger such a massive tsunami, is known as a megathrust earthquake. This event is caused by the sudden release of accumulated stress when the plates along the subduction zone give way abruptly. In this region, there is the potential for a magnitude 9 earthquake. If a megathrust earthquake occurs along the subduction zone, it can severely disrupt the surrounding water and trigger a super tsunami. A megathrust earthquake along the Cascadia Fault could trigger a tsunami that would devastate coastal communities along the Pacific coast with waves over 30 meters high. But this raises the difficult question, how can such an event be predicted with any degree of precision? Geologists determine the intervals at which these Cascadia earthquakes occur by analyzing sediments deposited in undersea canyons off the Pacific coast. This is because when a seaquake triggers a tsunami, underwater landslides occur and enormous amounts of material rush down into these ocean canyons. The mud stirred up by this process is then deposited in a layer known as torpidite. This torpidite is therefore the key to researching these seaquakes and above all to assessing future risks. The torpidite studies are somewhat concerning because in terms of the deposits, the 1700 earthquake compared to 19 similar faults is only average in terms of torpidite thickness and mass over the last 10,000 years. And about half a dozen torpidites are larger than the 1700 event and half a dozen are smaller. In other words, there have likely been significantly more powerful earthquakes and consequently more powerful tsunamis of which we simply have no record because they occurred so long ago. There is simply no clear pattern or unambiguous chronological sequence, making the prediction of specific earthquake events along the Cascadia zone an impossible task. What we can do is rely on early warning systems and above all public education in the event that a tsunami does occur. But even deep in the heart of the United States lies a zone that has been keeping geologists awake at night for years, because it was there that the most violent earthquakes in the continent's history once occurred. One of the most dangerous areas on Earth is the New Midwood Seismic Zone. Geologists themselves say it is one of the least understood yet most seismically active regions in the United States. It stretches across the states of Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Arkansas. In the early 19th century, the New Midwood Seismic Zone became the scene of one of the most violent series of earthquakes in world history. Between December 1811 and February 1812, residents were terrorized not by one, but by 3 massive earthquakes. These quakes had magnitudes ranging from about 7.0 to 7.5, a magnitude that has not been exceeded in the region since. And these quakes were felt across a vast area. According to eyewitnesses, church bells rang in New England, hundreds of kilometers away from the epicenter, because the quakes were so violent. Reports from that time describe how the ground rolled in waves, rivers reversed their course, and huge fissures opened up in the earth. The intensity of the quake was so great that it was felt in distant cities such as Boston and New York. The population, which at that time lived sparsely scattered across the affected area, once again faced chaos and destruction. The city of New Madrid, located near the epicenter and thus giving the zone its name, suffered catastrophic damage. And although those were the 3 major quakes, thousands of aftershocks followed, lasting until 1817 and contributing to the region's further destabilization. And today we know why earthquakes occur there in the first place. This is actually a bit curious because if we take a look at the tectonic plates, we see that no plates meet here at all, and usually earthquake zones always form where 2 tectonic plates collide. Actually, not always. Earthquakes can also occur within a single plate. This phenomenon is called an intraplate earthquake. These occur when stress builds up within the crust of a tectonic plate and is eventually released. Seismologists believe that the stresses generated at the plate boundaries are transmitted throughout the entire rigid plate body, leading to strong compressive pressures deep within the plate. Earthquakes occur when there are geological weak points that give way under this pressure. Such locations can include, for example, old faults or former plate margins that have been displaced into the interior of the plate over the course of Earth's history. In the case of the New Midwood Seismic Zone, one primary culprit stands out: the Real Food Rift. It formed about 750 million years ago during the Precambrian. At this geological fault, the stresses from the Pacific Plate in the west converge with those from the Mid-Atlantic Ridge in the east, and the stretching of the Earth's crust at this point nearly caused the continent to split apart. But the process came to a halt, and North America remained intact after all. According to scientists, an earthquake in this region is long overdue. What extent of destruction should we expect? Major cities such as St. Louis and Memphis lie within the influence of this tectonically active zone. The moment the ground in the Memphis area begins to shake again with the force of the historic quakes of 1811, the earth would split open beneath the city's pulsating lights as if centuries-old scars were suddenly bursting open. Riverbank reinforcements could give way, and vast tracts of land would be flooded, while in other places the land would subside or rise. Everyone agrees that it will happen eventually, but when exactly? This is where geologists really struggle, because unlike other earthquake-prone areas, the last major earthquake in the New Midwood Seismic Zone occurred a very, very long time ago, more than 200 years, and only rudimentary seismic data is available from that time. Although there are hundreds of small earthquakes in the region every year, they provide very little information about the next big one. The Geological Survey estimates the chance of experiencing an earthquake similar to those of 1811 to 1812 in the next 50 years at about 7 to 10%, and the chance of experiencing an earthquake of magnitude 6 or greater within the next 50 years is 25 to 40%. In the Campi Flegrei region west of Naples, the situation already looks more critical. Here, the Earth has been rumbling particularly violently in recent days. Within 48 hours, the Seismic network recorded over 70 earthquakes. Over the past week, there were 166, and so far this year, there have been a record-breaking 5,312 earthquakes. The strongest quake in the last 2 days had a magnitude of 2.5. Local residents are growing increasingly desperate. On social media, calls for evacuations at the government's expense are growing louder. The Campi Flegrei is a massive caldera that has been responsible for 2 ultraplinian eruptions in the past. The strongest of these eruptions, which occurred 39,000 years ago, had a VEI of 7. At that time, the ash spread as far as Siberia. In the greater Naples area, tuff deposits up to 60 meters high bear witness to the unimaginable force of this eruption. The last eruption occurred in 1538 when the Monte Nuovo cinder cone was formed. Since then, it has remained quiet, at least on the surface, because a great deal is happening underground. Volcanologists are observing a long-term trend of pressure buildup in the hydrothermal system. This means tension is building up, and at some point it must be released. Many experts compare the current situation to the period leading up to the 1538 eruption. Back then, there was also a phase of ground uplift lasting over 100 years before the eruption occurred. Since 2005, the ground in Pozzuoli has been rising again, and earthquakes are becoming more frequent. Whether this means an eruption is imminent is hard to say. Volcanoes aren't precision timepieces that can be predicted with exactitude. It could erupt in the next few years, or it could be 100 years from now. The situation is extremely complex, and the authorities face a dilemma. On the one hand, they want to protect the population. On the other hand, raising the alert level would have massive economic and social consequences. The mayor of Pozzuoli is reported to have said that the Neapolitan economy would collapse if the alert level were raised. Some residents even accuse the authorities of downplaying the danger for economic reasons. But what would be the alternative? A forced evacuation would tear apart the social fabric of the region. Many longtime residents and homeowners would refuse to leave, especially if it's unclear how long an evacuation would last and whether they'd receive compensation. On Mount Etna, people are still waiting in vain for compensation that was promised over 40 years ago. So the situation in the Campi Flegrei illustrates quite impressively just how difficult it is to deal with volcanic hazards. On the one hand, we want to protect people. On the other hand, we can't live in constant fear. So guys, I hope you've now gotten a good overview of just how turbulent our planet really is right now. And believe me, that's not nearly everything that's going on around the world right now. I'll of course keep you updated on all further developments here on the channel. Feel free to subscribe and don't forget to hit that thumbs up. And speaking of immense forces of nature, researchers have just discovered a completely new material in the remnants of the Hiroshima atomic bomb explosion. An alloy that, according to all the rules of chemistry, shouldn't even exist and was literally created only by the detonation of the atomic bomb. It's an incredible story. Feel free to click on the video in the top right corner. It's really fascinating. As always, you'll find another topic related to science and space in the bottom right corner. Otherwise, I'd say see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.